Welcome to another installment of Michael's Record Collection and this video format. This week we are talking with Ben Montgomery from Records Revisited. It's a great podcast, and you know what? I'm rather than me talk about it, Ben, I want you to give your little elevator pitch about your podcast.
Okay. I'll see what I can do on that. I'm the worst at promoting myself because I feel like it's just braggadocious when I start talking about it. We are a podcast that talks about music. I mean, that's essentially what it is. We have guests on for almost every episode, mostly musicians, but we do run the gamut of. We've had some authors on. We've had Alexi Lawless, who is a soccer player, but he's also a music nerd, and Del Murphy, the MVP from the Atlanta Braves, also a music guy, and so we had him on for an episode. Really, it's just people talking about a record that they love. Our premise is a little bit different, but because we make our guests score the record from favorite to least favorite,
Mm-hmm.
and then we come up with a top five based off of our cumulative scores, which sometimes makes the guest hate us. We've been called bastards before by a couple of our guests for making them score a record that they cherish and love, but I think by doing it this way, we've really got some great conversation because it's more than just surface level of, oh, I kind of like this song. Okay, well, why is this your number seven as opposed to your top song? Is it the lyrics? Is it because there's this one hook in it that's just great? The drummer is on top of his game on this particular one. So it really causes the guest to really think about the record, and I think that it translates into some really fun episodes.
Well, I do too, but that was a really long elevator ride. Um,
I told you it was going to be bad. I'm trying to promote the record. Trying to promote our podcast. It's I just get talking about it, and it's a passion project for us.
yeah, I get it. The thing I think that connects you and I, is that love of music and those, just the enjoyment of records and just you know, the the simple pleasure of putting an album on and listening to it, start to finish. And I do album rankings too, so I know sometimes it's difficult when you're trying to, you know, choose which of your children you love the most, kind of thing.
Right,
And it's
right.
it's difficult, but that's one of the things that I find compelling about the show is that you guys do go back and forth, and sometimes you're really not on the same page about a song, and and it's that I think makes for a good podcast, because then there's that moment of trying to explain yourself, and maybe even trying to persuade the other person a little bit of what you're hearing in the music. And in fact, I just wasn't too long ago, I was listening to your show about Cheap Trick at Buddhicon,
Okay, yeah.
and I was like,
One of the few episodes that we didn't have a guest on because that guest called us like a half hour before we were supposed to record and said, I got a family emergency, I can't make it.
yeah,
And so rather than messing up because we record on Tuesdays and Saturdays, um, at least one of those days during the week, and we hadn't recorded earlier in the week, and we're like, crap, we're going to be a week behind on a episode. So we're like, what can we do in a half hour's notice? And Cheap Tricks at Buddhicon was one of those records that Wayne and we connected with in high school. That was, even though it had come out, I don't know, 5-6 years before we were listening to it. It was one of those songs that was kind of stuck in my cassette deck. Um, and yeah, it was one of those albums that we connected over. One of the few that back in the day that Wayne and I agreed on. If you've listened to a number of episodes, you can tell that Wayne is more of he's more of the punk rock dude, the hard rock dude, and I'm more of the Americana guy. So, while he's listening to, he's a big Bowie fan, he's a big Stones fan.
Mm-hmm.
So while he's listening to those guys, I'm the Van Morrison and the Wilco and the Neil Young guy. So yeah.
So I'm listening to the at Buddhicon episode, and I'm like, well, surely Surrender is going to be everybody's number one, right? But and you all had it high, but it wasn't everybody's number one, and it was interesting listening to y'all, give your reasoning for that, and that's one of the things I enjoy about the show. How did this thing start? Was this something that you always wanted to do? Did you fall into it? When did it start?
Yeah, I've shared this a few times, and this is going to be long-winded as well, so
that's fine.
You'll have to forgive me. But back in 2018, Wayne and I were both kind of going through some of our own struggles. He was in the midst of divorce number 2. I was really unhappy with my job. I didn't have a creative outlet at that time. I'd been in some cover bands locally, and I wasn't a good enough bass player to like be in a really good band. So I didn't have a creative outlet at that time. I was going through a little bit of a writer's block, and I was just listening. I at that point I was commuting from Winter Garden to Lake Mary for my work. So I was in the car for 2 hours a day and listening to a lot of podcasts. And I just didn't like a whole lot of the music podcasts that I was listening to. There were a few that I really liked, but the hosts just were like potty mouths. And, those were turnoffs. Like, just talk about music, stop trying to be funny and shock me. Just let's talk about music. And I kind of talked Wayne into doing it with me. And I said, I think we could do this. And because Wayne and I for years are always texting each other of, okay, tell me your favorite Guns N' Roses songs. Or it'd be like, tell me your favorite Bowie songs from the Berlin period. It's just these random top 10 lists that we would come up with. And I'm like, I bet other people would enjoy listening to us have these really dumb conversations about music. And so I talked him into it. Honestly, the first 10, 12 episodes, it was just me and him. Some of them were a little rough because we were trying to figure out how to be podcast hosts. And after a while, I'm like, let's start inviting people on. And so I invited a couple of my friends who are also musicians, and it kind of just ballooned from there. Because we thought, oh, we'll have guests on like twice a month, and that's enough variety to keep it fresh. We got into this really good groove where, so I don't know if you listen to the Scotch and Good Conversation podcast, local.
No.
So Peter is a local podcaster here in Central Florida as well. And I was listening to his podcast, and he asks all of his guests, who do you know that I don't know that should come on my podcast? And I'm like, that's freaking brilliant. Like, he's pulling these people who he's already built this rapport with and getting guests from this. So we started doing that as well. And so we started with Ira Elliott, who is the drummer for one of my favorite bands, Not a Surf. And we said, who do you know? And he was like, who'd be great? Doug Gillard from Guided by Voices, he should come on your podcast. And I'm like, okay, well, let's have Doug come on. And we went from, so Doug comes on, somebody in the Guided by Voices fan club catches a hold of our episode and shares it. And so, because I'm when you're first starting a podcast, you're always looking at your numbers and seeing, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's great. I had 15 people download my podcast yesterday. So, I'm checking the numbers, and all of a sudden we went from 15 downloads for a day to there was 400 downloads. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? And it was because somebody had shared it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Doug, introduced us to somebody else. We threw that question out to a couple other guests that we had on, and it's now ballooned to the point where instead of having guests on twice a month, we have guests on twice a week. And we're recording this 1st of May. I'm already booking people for late July.
Wow.
So, and people want to come on our podcast because their friends are going, hey, you want a really fun 90 minutes, go hang out with Ben and Wayne. So that's a huge compliment to us, because people want to hang out with us and talk music, which it's humbling.
It's fun. It's a fun activity, I think, for anybody.
Yeah.
What is your I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going in blind. Is this,
yeah.
Do you have a real job?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So is this something that you hope at some point will become your real job? Or I should rephrase. Do you want this to become self-sustaining enough that it can be your main source of income?
No. And the reason why is, it's me and Wayne, so it would have to be big enough that it would have to sustain both of us, because he's committed to doing this. Originally it was like, he told me, he was like, if you want to have some of your friends, guest host with you for some episodes, go for it. So we started doing that because he didn't want to be available twice a week. And then he kind of had that the FOMO, where he was missing out on some really good conversations. So it would have to be something that would sustain both of us, and both of us make okay money at what we're doing. And I don't think that we would ever get to the point where it would sustain both of us. Second thing is, I don't know if it turns into a job, would the passion for music still be there? Because it would turn into a job. Right now it's a passion thing, and it's fun. And I don't think that there's that long game. I think it's just a side project, and it's fun while we're doing it.
So one of the things I like about your show, you do this every show as far as I can tell, is you ask the same question at the beginning of every show: what T-shirt are you wearing?
That's the all important question.
Yes.
Yep.
What is the germination for that? And has it been there from the beginning, or did that come along somewhere after you'd started?
It's been there from the beginning. The germination of that is, Wayne has a closet full of T-shirts, and so we thought that it would be fun as an icebreaker to just talk about some of his T-shirts. Then he decided, I'm going to wear a different T-shirt for every single episode. And I'm like, okay, but we're doing this for the long haul. You realize that. So we've done over 180 episodes. Wayne is on about 165 of them, and he has not worn a single shirt more than once on the podcast. Our guests love us because sometimes he will come prepared and he will have bought a shirt off of their website, or he will, like, I don't know if you've listened to too many episodes, but I really handle the interview portion at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We now that we're doing video recording as well, I've caught him on what he's doing during the interview portion, because he's usually pretty quiet during that point. It's because he's shopping for t-shirts. He's literally shopping for t-shirts for future episodes.
Oh, does he have a count of how many t-shirts he owns?
No, but we just started a Patreon, and he's like, I got to get rid of some. We're gonna start giving some of these away to our Patreon supporters.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. I was going to ask you, because I can't tell what shirt you're wearing. What is that t-shirt that you're wearing?
So I am wearing. One of our guests was a band called Ships Have Sailed. They're an LA band, and this is one of my most comfortable t-shirts. Like, he even, when the guy from Ships Have Sailed came on, he's like, yeah, and he sold me on, he's like, we really made sure that these weren't just some crappy Hanes t-shirts. We wanted to make sure that they were comfy. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll go buy one. And I did, and it's now one of my favorite t-shirts because
Thanks.
Yeah.
I recently, when Amoeba Records Amoeba Music reopened out west,
yeah,
I wanted to support them, and so I thought, well, I could buy a record, but then I have to wait for the record. So why don't I just buy some merch? So I bought this.
Which one did you go to?
I got the Berkeley one.
Okay.
There it is. Because it seemed somehow less touristy than the Hollywood one, or whatever.
Because I was going to ask if you went to the Hollywood one, because one of our former guests, Ronnie Barnett, works at that Hollywood location. Ronnie is the former bassist of the band. Oh, crap! I knew I was going to totally space it. Yeah. No, I'm spacing it out. I've had too many guests.
That's all right.
You can edit this part out.
Sure. That's what I do. I edit video. That's okay. I find too that, things that I knew, I used to be able to say, every band member of every band from every album I own for years and years and years.
I'm old now.
I can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
I can't.
The Muffs. The Muffs. That is the band. The Muffs.
Okay. Somebody will talk about a bass player, a guitarist, and I'll be like, I know that name, and I can't. The brain won't make the connections anymore. And then they'll tell me, and I'm like, oh yeah, duh.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get old. So that's a fun thing for younger, folks to look forward to.
That's what you have to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah. They need to fix that. Get on that, science. I mean, what are you doing? Do you have ready at the top of your frontal lobe, top 5 albums of all time? Do you all constantly revise it, or do you just know these are my desert island discs?
It changes. It changes with the times. I have a couple go-tos that I listen to every few months, because it's just I need to do that table reset. Sometimes we do episodes that the guests pick that aren't my favorite, and so I kind of need that palate cleanse. I listen to Neil Young's Harvest probably every 4 or 5 months. That's one of my all-time go-tos. Actung Baby from U2 is another one of my go-tos. I've been on record of saying that REM is my favorite band of all time. So, pick any one from them, whether it's Murmur, whether it's Automatic for the People, whether it's Reckoning, whether it's Life's Rich Pageant. I mean, that could be my favorite REM album that week.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another one of my go-tos. Um, I love a lot of the early '90s kind of college. Well, I call it whiner rock because it's a little bit whiny. So I'm Counting Crows, Gin Blossoms, Toad the Wet Sprocket, that kind of genre.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of August and Everything After from Counting Crows. That's another one of those albums that I go back to on a regular basis. Um, I do have a couple other albums that would probably surprise people. Carbon Leaf's Indian Summer is an album that I go back to on a regular basis. They're one of my favorite live bands. I've had a couple of the guys from that band on as guests. And I'm a big Wilco fan. So Yankee Hotel Foxtrot is a record that I put on every couple months as well. And because I grew up in the Seattle area, Pearl Jam's Versus, that's one that I go back to. 10, of course, is just freaking classic.
Mm-hmm.
So I listen to that every couple months. And I'm a big Posies fan. I don't know if you're familiar with the Posies, but Dear 23 and Frosting on the Beater and Amazing Disgrace, those three albums that came out back in the early 90s to mid 90s.
Yeah, I remember Flavor of the Month being in very heavy rotation on alt rock radio at the time.
Yeah.
Where I was in Columbus, Ohio at the time, was kind of where I grew up, and they had CD 101, which I think is CD 102.1 now, but it's
Okay.
yeah, they played that all the time.
Yeah. So those are some of my go-tos. I mean, I'm constantly acquiring music. If you follow me on Twitter or Facebook, you can see what I'm spinning on a regular basis. I don't post everything that I'm listening to. I probably listen to 5 or 6 albums a day. It's background music while I'm working from home, and yeah, so that's it.
Do you go a lot of do you go to a lot of shows?
I did before COVID. I would probably go to about two or three shows a month. I love the local scene here in Orlando. It's actually really good, and hits my sensibilities. I'm an Americana fan, so there are some good artists here. Big fan of Thomas Wynn and the Believers, if you're familiar with them.
I don't know a whole lot. I will admit I don't know a whole lot about the music scene here, other than a band a friend of mine is in called Heart Attack Diner.
Okay.
They play around sometimes, but
I have not seen them, but I've heard the name.
Yeah. So, but I love to go shows at the Plaza because it's such a nice, intimate, show, a place. And all of the shows I had lined up to go to in 2020 have been rescheduled, and so I'm looking forward to that. But I got to wait till 2022, and I got to admit, some of these folks are not the youngest musicians, and I'm a little concerned about buying tickets in advance for people like Justin Hayward and Colin Hay and Bruce Hornsby, because they're not spring chickens anymore.
Well, the only show that I really wanted to go to last year was the Doobie Brothers, because Michael McDonald had got back with the guys, and that again has been rescheduled to 2022. And fingers crossed that, because those guys aren't young either, so fingers crossed that nobody kicks the bucket before we see them.
It's a terrible discussion we're having.
I know it is so morbid, but whatever.
I just bought tickets yesterday I have to go up north to see them because they're not playing anywhere near here. I got Genesis tickets.
Okay.
Because Genesis for me is like your REM. That's my band. That's
Yeah.
my favorite band, and the favorite album could change on any given day. It has often changed on any given day, but I saw them in 2007, and I know what I'm getting into. I know they're not as energetic.
Right.
The beats slowed down a little bit. The register has come down a little. Phil's
Was
voice isn't as
was
strong.
yeah, was Phil playing the drums during that tour, or
He was still playing the drums then, but he
okay?
was really putting himself through torture every
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
He started to really get, his infirmities started to kick in midway through that tour, and he just somehow pushed through it.
Because this kid Nick is playing drums for them now, right?
Yeah, so I'm I'm excited to see, give them one last send off. So I'm going back to Columbus to see them.
Yeah.
I had a whole adventure with Ticketmaster and their whole system, but I managed to get
Awful.
tickets.
It's awful.
It
Ticketmaster
was
is the devil.
it was surprising. What happened was you had to become a verified fan to be part of the pre-sale. So you had to sign
Right.
up.
Yep.
So you had to pick your venue, click on the venue, sign up to become a verified fan. And then if you got selected for the pre-sale, then they would send you the night before the pre-sale, they would send you the URL and your
Yep.
code. So the night before I get my URL and my code, I didn't really mess around with it. But the next day, early in the morning, before the 10 o'clock was the sale started, I went and I clicked on the thing, and I noticed this is a link for Cleveland, not for Columbus. This is not right. So of course I tried to find the Ticketmaster phone number. I call it. We're not answering phone at this time. Please see our website, blah, blah, blah. You go to the website, they have a live chat feature, but it's only for if you have already made an order and you have an order
Right.
number.
Right.
So I used their message, which emails them. And I told them, here's my problem. Didn't expect to hear back from them. 10 o'clock came, I got in the queue, and I'm like, oh, I figured out what the Columbus URL was just by the last two characters in the URL for Cleveland. And they let me in the queue, it let me in, and then I put my code in and it wouldn't take my code.
Right. Right.
So I screwed around with that for 15 minutes, and then I got an email from Ticketmaster answering me, and they gave me another code. So by then, all the really good seats in my price range are gone.
Of course. Of course.
I'm left, with what was left, and so I found some and I bought them. And I was looking around, and it's amazing to me how many. I looked at some of they gave me some universal code because I tried a couple of the other venues and it worked. And it was amazing to me how different the pricing was at different arenas around the country. Like Charlotte's was really expensive. And Columbus's cheapest ticket was twice of what Cleveland's cheapest ticket was. And I was trying to figure out why that was. And I'm on Ticketmaster, and it's not even showing me the Cleveland date. And I'm like, so I did a Google search real quick and went in. It's like, oh yeah, Cleveland is a SeatGeek arena, not a Ticketmaster arena. And so somehow they're able to, make it cheaper or make it less expensive for fans to get it.
Interesting.
It was an ordeal, but I got the tickets, and I'm set to go now. Just hoping everybody stays healthy, till December.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that. Yeah, I don't have so I bought tickets for Toad the Wet Sprocket, Gin Blossoms, Bare Naked Ladies. That was supposed to happen in a couple weeks. They ended up pushing that to next year as well. Probably because the Canadians aren't letting anyone in or out.
Yeah.
So Bare Naked Ladies, they're stuck up there. So yeah, between that and the Doobie Brothers, those were the only two that I really wanted to see. I do have some tickets. You're up in Lake Mary area?
Yeah, Sanford, so pretty close.
Okay. So Tuffy's. I haven't been to that venue yet, but one of my former guests in Great Peacock, the band Great Peacock, is supposed to be there with Cordovas in a couple weeks. So perks of doing the podcast is I'm on the list. So so I get to go. That and that's my first live event in what, 14 months, 15, 16 months, 16 months. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's been a long run. You're all vaccinated up?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So Records Revisited. I know you. I see your tweets. I see. Sometimes you're like, oh, I just found this for $3 at a, thrift store or whatever. Sometimes you're putting some of your recent finds on there. Obviously, you're not just a records guy. You got CDs. You still got cassettes?
I have very few cassettes left, and mostly that is because my cassette deck pooped out on me about 10 years ago, and I haven't been able to find a good replacement deck that I'm not willing to pay an arm and a leg for. And you can find refurbished cassette decks, from the geeks that's what they do.
Yeah.
They're not cheap, and so so I have a handful of cassettes, but nothing crazy. Plus, if you go to Goodwill or if you go to Salvation Army, you're not going to find cassettes. You're just not. I don't know where they are. I think they're all in landfills now or something, because I never see cassettes out there. But you do see a bunch of CDs. And before the pandemic started, I was avid bargain bin shopper for vinyl. And with the pandemic, it seems like everybody is out buying vinyl. So
yeah,
what I was paying, $2 or $3 for pre-pandemic, they're all going for like $8-10 now. And so I'm still shopping out there.
Yeah.
I'll go on these little binges, and I'd be like, oh, I gotta add that to my collection. So like recently I went through a Heart phase. And so
okay,
because growing up in Seattle, that wasn't my band. Like, I was more into the Soundgardens and the Pearl Jams and the Posies, and Heart was, well, they were Heart, and so recently I don't know, about a year ago, I got in a lot of records that I won on eBay, and Heart's self-titled album was included in that. And so I put that on. I'm like, yeah, this is really good. And so I kind of went through a Heart phase, and so I've been purchasing some of their albums, re-listening to some of their stuff, which is it's spotty. Don't go listen to Passion Works, for instance. It's not good.
No, I think they have one good song on there, and then the rest is
kind of... and the one song that I used to like now I listen to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so 80s. Like, I can't listen to it. But if you go back to their first 4 albums are just strong. And so I'm like, I gotta have that. I gotta have Dreamboat Annie in my collection. I've got to have Baby Lestrange in my collection. So.
Yeah, I went through that with Walmart before they shrunk their music section to almost nothing. They had when they still had a full wall of CDs. Every now and then they would get in like a whole collection of a band and put them all out there for like $4 or $5.99, and I'd be like, okay, here's Dog and Butterfly, here's Baby Lestrange, here's Dreamboat Annie. That's how I got all of those. So and I did that with several bands. I think AC/DC. I got a lot of AC/DC that way.
Very good.
So I like to shop the bargains too. Did you get, because you're old enough to have done this, did you get out of vinyl and then back into vinyl, or did you just never stop with vinyl?
I got out of it. it wasn't mostly it was mostly because and I've shared this on the podcast, so I'll shrink it down, but I moved to Florida 20 years ago, and prior to that I had pretty extensive vinyl collection. I DJ'd for a number of years, so I had I had all sorts of club remixes and whatever of different bands, and I sold almost all of my vinyl collection to pay for the move to come down here to Florida. And I kept a handful of records, and I'm like, I can't get rid of that. But I pretty much got rid of everything. There's a lot these days now that I kick myself because I had almost all of the Smith collection, and trying to find any of the originals will set you back a few dollars. And so I'm kind of kicking myself on certain things like that. The Clash records that I sold, and the original Big Audio Dynamites, and that whole era. I sold a lot of the vinyl from that. I had a large Led Zeppelin collection as well. I think I had everything except for Coda on vinyl, and I sold all of those as well. And so again, can't find those cheaply. So
especially not those old pressings that sound so good.
They're tough. So I did get out of it for about 10 years, and then about 10 years ago I slowly started buying vinyl if I would see it for cheap. I would pick up a record or two. And then since doing the podcast, I've really gotten into physical media. So between CDs and records, that's just that's my thing.
Do you have a count? Do you know how many titles you have?
I have no idea. I really have no idea. I mean, here, I'll show you the video of my wall. So that's all the vinyl. That's one thing of CDs there, some CDs over here. You can see the stacks on my piano as well.
Yeah.
And then I've got I think A through E is out in the front room. I've got soundtracks and a music in a milk crate over by my feet over here. It's just it's all over the place. And over by my stereo, I've got 3 giant stacks of CDs that I've purchased over the last couple months that I just haven't listened to yet. I'll eventually get to that.
This is half my CD collection. The other half's in the other corner. Same shelves, custom
same
shelves.
shelving.
Yeah. And then I have box sets and DVDs that have CDs in them in my entertainment center under my TV. But I have a count because I'm an insane person, and I have everything in Discogs. And I kept it all in a spreadsheet, which I lost when a computer crashed years ago. Now I have it in a Google Doc, so that it's out there.
It's out there.
Yeah. And then I've also recently, my buddy talked me into putting it all on Discogs, so I put it all on Discogs, and that took weeks. So
I just even thinking about putting my collection on Discogs gives me anxiety.
Yes, I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
I don't want to do it.
If you do it from the beginning, great. Or if you do it when your collection is small, great. But it's very daunting. It's like I would just let me just try to get through 50 a day. And
and I don't know if you're the type of person. So when I started collecting CDs, impulsively back in the 90s, I was also the guy who would also go to the CD, the used CD places and exchange stuff all the time. It'd be like, yeah, I haven't listened to this, and I'm probably not going to listen to it again for 3 years. I might as well just get something different.
Mhm.
And so I do that all the time as well. So putting something on Discogs, knowing that I'm probably going to flip it, um, probably just would not be a good thing. And every couple of years I will go through these phases where I'm like, it's time to pare down the collection. So I just got done selling. I think I sold about $500 worth of my CDs.
Mm.
Just and you'll be pained to know that some of them were Genesis, early Genesis CDs that I was just like, I'm never
Yeah.
gonna listen.
I have multiple copies of them, so
Okay, all
I'm
right.
set there.
So it
Uh,
wasn't you that bought
no.
them.
Did you keep the Buster soundtrack?
I did keep the Buster soundtrack.
Nice.
And you know what it was? Yeah, so I got through the entire soundtrack, and I'm like, it's cool. I could get a hold of any of these songs on Spotify. And then Groovy Kind of Love is, I believe, is the last song on the record. And I'm like, I I don't know if I want to admit this, but I really love that song.
It's a great
Like,
song.
it's so I'm like, I got to keep this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I have that song on various discs. I do not have the Buster soundtrack. It's one of the very few things from Phil Collins that I don't have, because I
Well,
have all of his solo stuff
there's what,
too.
there's three songs on that.
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
Phil, and then the rest are, 60s
Yeah,
tunes or early 70s tunes.
and I have like because I have his Tarzan soundtrack and his Brother Bear soundtrack, and
Okay.
I got the Brother Bear soundtrack at Best Buy the day that it came out because I'm that much of a geek when it comes to Phil Collins and Genesis. But that's what I like.
Hey man, that's cool. That's cool.
So your show is available basically everywhere down podcasts are downloadable, right?
You can find it anywhere. I don't know if we're on Amazon. I don't think I ever posted it to the Amazon podcast platform, but yeah, you can find us anywhere. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Castbox, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Yeah, we're all over the place.
And you say you record on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Do you have what is your set release schedule?
Typically, so it just kind of depends on how many we have in the can. We typically will release an episode every Tuesday. However, if it's a week where we have 2 episodes to release, it's Monday and Friday. So we're recording this on a week where I have 2 episodes coming out. So after I get done here, I will be posting Fridays out there. So, it's right there. As soon as people wake up in the morning, it'll be downloaded into their phone.
Do you remember what your very first favorite song was?
Very first.
When you think back when you were a kid and there's one that sticks out for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple. I remember late 70s. My dad listened to a lot of soft rock stations, and I remember hearing the station that he listened to played Bridge Over Troubled Water all the time. And so I thought it was a new song.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. It had come out 8 years prior to that. But that was the one song that every time I would hear it, I would just be mesmerized by it. Especially the ending part. And then when I got a hold of a cassette player, the one song that I completely fell in love with was Train in Vain from The Clash.
Mm.
I got a little play on the top 40 radio station, and I recorded it off on cassette, listened to it all the time, had no idea that The Clash were this punk rock band.
Yeah.
Because Train in Vain, it's kind of poppy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a punch in your face, you know, you know, typical Clash song. And so when I finally bought London Calling a few years later, because I found out, you know, what record that was on, you know, I get it home and I'm like, what did I just buy?
Yeah, that's a little. There's a lot of different songs on that album that
Yes, there is.
don't go with Train in Vain stylistically. I remember also thought it was a new song, but it wasn't. It was, I guess, 5 or 6 years old, and was in love with Yellow Submarine by the Beatles.
Okay.
Because, you know, the Beatles were, even in the early 70s, the Beatles were still all over the radio.
Oh yeah.
And they are now if you listen to classic rock stations. But
Yes.
but yeah, back then it was, you know, and my parents liked the Beatles, and it was like,
my
oh,
parents
Yellow
did
Submarine?
not. We've talked about this on a couple episodes. My dad hated John Lennon. Hated John Lennon.
Yeah.
So every time Hey Jude would come on the radio station, my dad would change the channel.
Yeah. My dad liked the early Beatles. He obviously didn't like what they became later on. And
Sure.
my mom liked them, but she was kind of whatever's on the radio is fine with her. And that was on the radio a lot. She did have a favorite. She was a Barry Manilow fan.
Your parents were friends with my parents then.
My dad had a very eclectic, a lot of different tastes. He liked a lot of country, and he liked Elvis. He was a big Elvis fan. The Beach Boys, he was a big Beach Boys fan. They had Sonny and Cher records. You know, we had one of the big console stereos with the record rack inside of it.
Yep, we had one of those as well.
And
horrible sounding.
Yeah, I absconded with what I believe was an original pressing of the first Monkees album, which nice. I no longer have because I got out of vinyl many years ago when I moved to Texas for a while. I was working in sports. I moved to Texas. I got rid of my stereo and bought just a bookshelf system because I was all over on cassettes and CDs at this point.
Yep.
And I didn't have a turntable for years. I kept the box of records that I had. Like I had given some away, but I had kept most of them. But I knew they sounded just thrashed because my old stereo was just a Sears stereo I mean, it had no counterweight on it. You know, I didn't know I was destroying these records when I was playing them. Yeah. But, you know, and then when CDs came out, everybody's like, oh, you know, I miss vinyl. And I was thinking, I don't remember vinyl sounding all that good personally, but that's why, because I wasn't really, first of all, nobody ever told me I had to clean my records, you know, and then, you know, I wasn't playing them on good equipment. So, they wouldn't sound great. If I had kept them, they wouldn't be in very good shape. So when COVID hit, I actually got into a little retail therapy and was buying box sets that I had missed out on. And I was like, this band Marillion had a whole bunch of box sets come out, and I was collecting those. And I thought, I started thinking about getting a turntable again. And I was like, nah, it just seems like a lot of work. I don't know. I hemmed and hawed for a long time. And then I got laid off. So I was out of work for 4 months. When I got back into, when my job called me back, which was shocking because I've been laid off a lot of times and my old job has never called me back to work before. And I was like, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to get that turntable. And so like now I've got like, I don't know, I'm probably approaching 20 records, but my goal is to keep the vinyl collection small. Everything I own, I don't have to have a vinyl copy of. I want to keep it down to like, I'm saying this, but it probably won't happen. I want to try to not go over 200 records. And if I get to 200 records and I want to add one, then I feel like I need to get rid of one.
200 comes really quick.
Yeah, I bet
That's
it does.
All I can say. It just came really quick.
Oh man. So I got that to look forward to trying to maintain it, because the bottom line is if I'm not playing them very often, then I shouldn't have them, and I want to have records that I play a lot. And so the goal was, I remember there were 3 or 4 titles from when I was a kid that I really wanted to replace. I really wanted to get back, and I've only so far gotten one of them back, and that is Boston's "Don't Look Back,"
Okay.
which wasn't the first album I ever had, but it was one of the early ones that I just played to death.
So did you get a early pressing of that, or
No, I went and bought a new one, a brand new
Okay.
one that I
Okay.
ordered.
Yeah.
But I did look on Discogs to find what people were saying about certain pressings. I took that seriously, and I got a pretty good pressing of that. And then, so the other ones are Cheap Trick at Buddhicon. I want Kiss Alive, because that was the first real rock and roll record that I owned. Up to that point, it was like K-Tel records and
Yeah.
novelty records like Goofy Greats and the Grease soundtrack.
I have that one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get Kiss Alive and then REO Speedwagon's High Infidelity, which is another one that I just played to death.
I have been outbid so many times on eBay for High Infidelity. I still don't have a copy of that. So
Yeah. It's so those are my grails, and I will have them eventually. I mean, I could probably go on Amazon and buy Kiss Alive, but I like to go to the record stores.
I do too. And I will tell you this. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can find it. And of course, I can't find it. Here we go. So I just got this today.
Okay. Good album.
I've had it on CD multiple times. Because you lend your favorite record because you want people to get turned on to it, and you don't always get your CDs back. So I've owned Harvest a couple different times. So here, I already mentioned one of the perks is sometimes you get on the list for free shows.
Mm-hmm.
So today, one of our listeners, so his brother passed away recently and had a big giant music collection, and he's like, I don't have the room for all of it. He's like, I want it to get in the hands of some people that are actually going to listen to the records.
That's
so
nice.
He's like, I'm going to send you a box, and I'm thinking, okay, box is 3 or 4 records. I think he sent me about 40 records.
Wow.
And also a couple, he sent me an Allman Brothers box set, the Velvet Underground box set. There's a couple Bob Dylan CD remasters that he sent me as well. So anyways, I'm going back up to Washington in a couple weeks. He also sent me a bunch of Bob Dylan records, so I'm taking those up to Wayne. I'm going to keep the Dylan CDs, and Wayne's getting the records. So that's one of the perks of doing this is
Mm-hmm.
people know that you're a record guy, and you're a collector, and I think they can tell by our social media that we listen to them. This is special to us. I just while I was making dinner, I was listening to Neil Young's Rust, and there's just something magical about hearing that on vinyl. That I don't know. It's just, I love it. I'm a music guy.
I can't can't even imagine what he paid for postage for that. I don't want to know. It's probably a lot.
$35, I think it was.
Oh man.
And I even said, dude, I'll reimburse you for the postage. He's like, nope, I just want this to go to somebody who's gonna love it like my brother did. I'm like, all right. So I found out what the name of his brother's favorite charity was, and so he's that charity is going to get little check from me here soon to pay for that postage. I mean, like I said, I'm looking at the stuff that was in that box, and I couldn't even put a dollar figure on what he gave me and Wayne. So
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's
great.
So how long do you plan to do this till it's not fun anymore?
I just I just said on an episode, I said if a guest picks a Celine Dion record to talk about, that's when I hang it up. So I mean, honestly, we've so we're 180 episodes into this. We've only done one Bowie episode. We haven't even done a Stones episode yet. That's coming up. Luckily, we did talk a guest into picking a Stones record, because I was like, we haven't done Stones yet. So he's like, hey, let's do Exile. Okay, let's do it. We've done 3 Beatles episodes. So we still have White Album to talk about. We still have Sgt. Pepper's to talk about. There's still a lot of U2 albums that I haven't talked about yet. We've only talked about 1 REM record. Actually, we've done 2 REM. We've done 2 REM albums. So there's still a lot of albums that we haven't talked about. And honestly, as long as the guests keep picking stuff that I'm like, oh, that's what you want to talk about? All right, cool. Like we just recorded an episode for Lucinda Williams.
Okay.
You know, not an artist that I gravitate to. I don't mind her. But as long as our guests keep picking stuff like Lucinda Williams and Gillian Welch and Jellyfish, that they're picking those kind of bands, we're going to be doing this for a while. And you know what, we didn't go into this thinking, oh well, we'll do this for 20 episodes and it's cool. But now we have a Patreon now, and so we've got supporters who are essentially paying for the cost of our recording and for our podcast hosting. And as long as they keep supporting us and making it so that we're not losing money like we did for the first 2 years of doing it, as long as that keeps happening, we're going to keep doing it, because it's fun and it's a passion thing at this point.
So the podcast is Records Revisited. Where can folks find you guys all over the internet?
If you go to recordsrevisitedpodcast.com, it'll take you over to our web, our hosting site. You can find all the episodes there, or, like I mentioned, you can find us on all the podcast platforms and you can go download. Yeah.
Twitter at Records Revisited.
It's at Podcast Records on Twitter. Some British guy had our Twitter handle. They actually were podcasting as well, and under the Records Revisited name, came out about the same time as we did, and kind of talked them into changing their name. It was a good thing that they did, because I think they may have recorded 6 episodes. Yeah.
They got out quick.
Yeah.
All right.
Which you'll find, if you're talking to, people, one of the things that you'll know is that the shelf life of most podcasts is like 10 episodes.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
You have a Facebook too, or no?
Yeah, you can find us at Records Revisited Podcast on Facebook. Wayne does the Instagram, because I don't really do Instagram, but you can find him on Records Revisited Podcast there as well. So a little bit different content there. He's not as active on the socials as I am, but every once in a while you can tell that he's had a few, and so he's had a few, and he's listening to some of his, because it'd be like, these are my 10 favorite Ramones songs, and here we go, and yeah, so different content there, and it's good.
Yeah, well, that's what I like that you guys do that with the texting, and it's almost like you're living out a scene from High Fidelity for the
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
We can sometimes be that guy.
Yeah, I was once accused by my wife. We were watching that movie, and she looked at me and said, "That's you and your friends." Like, I'm not that snobby, am I? Okay, maybe sometimes.
You know what? If you would have talked to me 15 years ago, I was that snobby. 15 years ago, I would not be buying hard albums, for instance. So,
yeah, you do mellow a little with age, and you go, okay, there's foods that I didn't used to like that I now like. Maybe there's music I didn't used to like that I would like now.
Yeah, for sure.
That's pretty good.
I still don't like Celine Dion.
I recently discussed a Celine Dion song when Jim Steinman passed away, and I did a newsletter on the top 10 Jim Steinman songs, because I think, even I'm not a Celine guy, but the song that he wrote that she did was really good. So,
which was,
I knew you were going to ask me that. I'm doing that brain thing where I can't think of it.
It's all coming back.
Back to me now. Yeah. Well, imagine forgetting a title like that.
It sounds like a Jim Steinman song.
Yeah.
Sure.
He had a lot of really great long titles, like "Making Love Out of Nothing at All."
I forgot that was his.
That's a lot of syllables for a song title.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I'd always been a fan of his songs, and a lot of times I didn't know they were his songs until much later. And because I grew up. I mean, you grew up not that long after me, but everybody I knew had Meatloaf's "Bat Out of Hell," and we just played the crap out of it all the time. In fact, I never owned a copy of it until probably just a few years ago, because everyone I knew had it. So I never had to do that. I don't know if you did this, but we did, when money was limited, we just would say, okay, you're getting that album, I'll get this album, and then we'll just, swap it and loan it to each other.
We just recorded an episode on The Cure's Wish, and we talked about on that episode how in the early 90s, we were in those stages of life where we didn't have a whole lot of extra scratch.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a band that both of us were like, no, I'm getting this. This is going in my collection. So we go to Tower Records, and usually the case was I would buy one record, he would record it on cassette, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And nope, for The Cure's Wish, both of us got in line with our own copies.
Yeah. Ben Montgomery from Records Revisited, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I kept you longer than I would normally keep somebody, but I enjoyed talking music with anybody, but it's very easy when you find a kindred spirit, and looking forward to listening to a lot more of your podcasts. And I don't listen to all of them, because I always check out what albums you're doing first, and I'm like, if it's something I'm into, I'm like, yeah, I want to hear what they said about that. But if it's not, maybe I'll put it on the back burner, and it just catches in my podcatcher and just sits there for a while until I go, oh, I got to get rid of some of these. But and I do the same with Pat Francis, the Rock Solid show. As well. But yeah, thanks so much for being with me this week, and keep doing what you're doing, because it really comes across. Your love of the music comes across. Your willingness to laugh at yourself sometimes about some of the stuff that you like, even though it may not be all that cool sometimes, is that comes through. And I think I think just anybody that listens to your show will listen and hear some familiar stories that they can relate to.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's since we're both Central Florida, let's meet up sometime.
For sure.